Hey everybody, Stephen the Purple Druid here with another video about how to improve your role-playing gaming. And today we are going to talk to John McGowan, who has just put together a new book called The Living Campaign. And we're going to talk about prep, zero prep, campaign prep, and a whole bunch of other things. So welcome, John.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
All right. So first of all, I want to say thank you for sending me the PDF of the book to take a look at in advance. I do have one coming from Amazon. Um,
Oh, I
based
appreciate that. Thank you.
based on my reading, I went ahead and ordered it. It is exactly, I think, um, or I shouldn't say exactly, but very much in line with my own philosophy on campaign creation and maintenance. And I have a hard time really processing reading on screens, and so the physical copy is much easier for me to uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Retention, reading
Yeah,
comprehension,
yeah,
that
yeah.
sort
No,
of
I know.
thing.
I'm the same way. I found that the only way for me to be able to read stuff electronically is with a Kindle, and I like because it does kind of almost look like a page. So,
Yes,
uh,
yes, I agree with that absolutely. So, um, yeah, so let's talk a little bit about campaign prep. You just obviously, like I said, you just wrote a book about it, um,
hmm.
and it's been a big topic on
Oh yeah.
social media lately. There's a lot of hashtag zero prep and hashtag campaign prep and hashtag prep addiction and things like that. So I'm
Yeah.
curious as to what is your point of view on doing campaign prep and or game prep and or session prep.
Well, so I think a lot of the arguments is kind of people sort of responding to what is it, like they're not like it's got a lot of people like talking past each other. So, as far as I could tell, when people talk about prep addiction, it's kind of, spending 20, 30 hours a week, just like kind of like doing these like meticulous branching quest trees. And I don't know if anybody would like disagree that like maybe knowing who the innkeeper, like what the inn is called, is like not the worst thing in the world, especially like if improv is like isn't like your particular strength, but just do it like really what it should be is like just the bare minimum or the things that you enjoy doing as the like campaign referee or game master or dungeon master or whatever the title of your core rule set is. So that makes sense.
Oh, I think it does make sense. And I think you hit two really important points there. One is that yes, people are talking past each other, which is very, very common. And the other is I think a little throwaway phrase you just used in terms of I think you said a campaign tree or a story tree.
Yeah, branching quest tree.
Quest tree, the branching quest tree.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. And maybe that's what people are talking about, but when I'm talking about prep, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about making some maps, and by maps I mean large scale maps. In fact, let's throw one up on the screen here. I should have it. I don't, because it's an image and not a PDF. How awesome is that? But I'm talking about a campaign map or a regional map or possibly even a world map if that's what you're into. And if you have some time, I know that can seem like overkill to make,
Well, yeah.
to
It,
make
it, it
a
it can be, but
campaign
I don't
map.
really think it. Like I don't know. Like some people maybe get a little too into it, but doing. I don't know if you need a whole nation, but like kind of knowing the area, I don't think is the worst thing in the world.
Right, right. And, you know, I think it's important to have at least the major features outlined, especially if you can see them, if the characters can see them. Um, and this was a long, a long thread on Twitter the other day, or I guess well, maybe 2 weeks ago now. Um, but if the PCs can see mountains from their village where you're starting the campaign, well, then obviously you should have that on your map. And it seems silly to me that if there are mountains that the PCs have seen every single day, that they would just head north for no reason. Let's see what's to the north, and they travel for 30 miles over the course of 2 or 3 days, and then all of a sudden you roll on the terrain table and get mountains and tell them, oh, you just stumbled onto some mountains all of a sudden. Um, because you can see those for days, especially if you're walking or on horseback.
Mhm.
It's different with cars, and maybe people aren't thinking in terms of horseback or walking. But
Right.
if you're 50 miles away from 10,000 foot tall peaks, you can see them, and you will see them for 3 or 4 days as you get closer and closer to them.
Yeah. Well, and I think like it's really just sort of so a big point where like the disagreement would come in is based on um like like you're saying kind of have those mountains ready, and I would like, which I think is perfectly valid, like if that's kind of helps you kind of describe to your players, like if that's something like you're trying to get like the area, you're going to be a little bit more descriptive as far as that goes, like I think that's perfectly fine. um but as I kind of get what the other side saying as well, where they're saying like, well, I'm not, I'm going to do this like 6 by 6 area and that's it. And then it was sort of just, maybe like the map would sort of become visible, like I would say probably through the downtime. Like scouting would probably be a downtime activity. Um, so like that's one of those things where I don't like, the distinction isn't enough for me to say like I don't know if it really, if it's like at the end of the day, if that's like the biggest deal, because I think like a DM depending could sell it, uh, but I'm not sure every DM can sell it. So that like there's some like kind of personal discretion there, is what I would say.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that to the extent that the players need to be on board with that sort of, unfurling or, unveiling of the campaign world, and they're on board with the idea that it's all literally completely unknown and everyone's going to be discovering it together. As a player, I would
Hmm.
feel, I would feel that would kind of burst the immersion.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, we've been walking across these plains for 3 days, and now all of a sudden there's mountains. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
that's,
yeah. No, I get it. Yeah.
I mean, I can't get my head around that. And so as a game master, I I feel the same way. I don't want to spring that on my players because that doesn't seem fair to them. What if they don't want to go to the mountains? They never wanted to go to the mountains. They want to go to the shore. I
Hmm.
mean, no matter where you're starting, and I understand the concept that the players have never, the characters have never traveled more than 10 miles from their home or whatever. But
Hmm.
generally speaking, you know where the mountains are, you know where the big dark forest is, you know where the shore is. You can point at those things. Maybe you don't know how
Hmm.
far or you've never been, but
Right.
generally speaking, the shore is to the south.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like, and that's what I say when they say like, when you like, get the response of like, quote, like nobody cares. That's like a nobody's pretty broad, and I've gamed with a lot of people, and I've gamed with like randoms. I've gamed at like local game stores, my house, like other people's houses, and like kind of what I found is like broadly speaking, like that's true. But when you get into like when you do have those kind of like more elite minded players, like they are concerned with that. They are going to ask about that, like you say, you know,
Oh,
like
sure.
it. And so, and that's kind of what I talk about, like people talking past each other, because like you're coming in and saying like, you're talking from like an elite mindset playing with elite gamers, and then but like for the most part, like people do just kind of like beer and pretzels games. Like I have like one of my campaigns right now is basically a beer and pretzels game, but the other one is like very, very stringent, and I get asked very like detailed and specific questions about my players. So yeah, so it's like maybe that's like what's kind of like informing my perspective, like when I see kind of people kind of arguing back and forth. That's why I didn't really even get involved in that one, because it's like I didn't really disagree with anything anybody was saying. But I didn't really see it as like being like mutually exclusive. It's like everybody
You
was sort
should
of right
jump
in their
in.
context. Yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe like yeah, that's kind of my that was kind of my thoughts on it. So if I don't comment, it's really just I don't have anything constructive to, like, or
I
like interesting to say.
I have a suspicion also that some of the folks that were commenting about how fun it is to explore the world and discover the world together, both players and referee, they also may be speaking from a perspective of, they have their campaign lasts for 6 sessions or 8 sessions. So,
Yeah, maybe
and
I
or they're in more of a one shot kind of culture. And so it doesn't matter if there are mountains 50 miles away because this is a one shot and we're only going to go investigate the forest.
some yeah, I mean that's like I could see that being the case. I do think some people actually sort of do enjoy just like this like really intense fog of war. There's like that's like maybe that's like more of a video game thing. Um, like I sit down and play like there's this game I am enjoying right now called Battle Brothers, and it has you could turn on your the fog of war on the overworld map, and you're just kind of discovering tiles as you run into them, and there's kind of a certain thrill to that. But I could see what you mean though too, where you're like I can see it from 3 hexes away. Like I think I would see a mountain, but yeah, like I don't know, like that is something I do. I don't know. I see the appeal, I guess. Like, I don't know. I hate that I kind of sound like wishy washy, because I do kind of sound that way a lot of things. But like, we just haven't touched on anything that I have my line in the sand where I say here and no further.
Right, right. Well, and see, and I think that might be a little bit of the difference between us because I don't see the appeal. I do not see the appeal of sitting down at a table and like literally no one knows what's around the corner.
Yeah, that's fair.
That doesn't seem appealing to me. It doesn't sound like fun.
There's a
Um,
way to do it badly. Like that is, I've seen it done badly too. Like, I'm not playing stupid
well, I
here.
would
So
love to see it done well. I'd love to. If anyone's watching, and you are a proponent of the zero prep and you like to play this way, please let's do a recording. I'd love to hear. Even it doesn't have to be the whole session. Just maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. I would love to hear how it works. I would love to hear someone actually, you know, go through the steps and put it out there. I mean, um, I think
I would,
that's a big part of creating and training and teaching new referees is making stuff like this available, especially if there's no one around, for them to play with in real life. It can be
Mhm.
hard to gain these practices.
Yeah, and I would say too, like if you're going for a true zero prep, you really shouldn't be doing it off the bat. Like you really need to kind of go solo first. You need to have like all your pages tabbed, and you need to like almost like a stop. Like you need to kind of train yourself. Like it has to be like almost like a stopwatch. Like you're gonna do this, flip, flip, flip. Okay, got it. Moving on to the next thing, and it has got to be like well oiled and well practiced before you attempt it around the table. Because it like you say, flip, 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 roll some dice, flip, flip, flip. Let me figure out how this. You have to practice that. That is
Right.
not a thing that is. I don't think it's a beginner thing that you
No,
should be
it is
trying.
absolutely not a beginner skill. And
So yeah, I would never present it that way.
no, no. And
So, but I do
well, and the
think
funny
there's a
thing is,
prohibition.
like you said, solo gaming also. is a completely different creature as well,
Sure, yeah.
and
From the perspective of it, that you trying to teach you like get a uh like an order of operations down. I think it's like very very useful for a game master who's
oh,
trying to
absolutely,
who's
absolutely.
trying
And I
to
think it's
sort of
I
do
think
those
it's
things.
worthwhile even if you aren't planning on doing total zero prep at the table.
Yeah.
But
Well, and my point, like, and so the thing where I would say, where I maybe break with that mindset is, if I'm saving myself all this time, why not use it for something I enjoy?
correct.
You know, like
Sure.
it's like okay, like like you might call that like prep addiction, I guess, but like is if I'm working on my novel, is that like writing addiction? Like I don't think so. Like I do think when you talk about prep addiction, I think it's a different beast entirely.
I think I agree with that. And I think the big weakness when it comes to the members of our community who are anti prep addiction is that they believe that doing things in advance means that you're automatically somehow married to it, and if the players never go there, it will hurt your feeling. Um,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and for me, I enjoy doing the world building, um, and in a similar sense, I've been a wargamer for a very long time, and I enjoy building the models and painting the little soldiers. That's a big
Hmm.
part of the hobby for me, and I enjoy
Hmm.
that part of it. There are other people that hate it. There are lots of people. I have played many war games with people who have unpainted miniatures. You know what?
Yeah.
And if that's what you want to do, you know what? That's great. You know, number one, if that's not fun for you, then I'm not going to force you to do it. Um, but personally, I enjoy looking at a cool table with cool scenery and at least decently painted miniatures on both sides. And it
Hmm.
just, I think it enhances the experience, it enhances the immersion, and makes for a better game all around.
Yeah, I mean, there's something like I don't know. There's something really kind of deep seated. Like you walk into a hobby store, like there's a hobby store pretty close by. It's got this like really elaborate train set, like right in the entrance, and like model trains, like a model train town, and like I can't help it. Like like I have no interest in like really doing anything with model trains, but every single time I walk into that store, I'm sort of mesmerized by these tiny buildings, you know.
Yes, I do
And
know. I know exactly what you're talking about. And there's
yeah, so
something
it's
there's something even more mesmerizing about it when you've created those buildings yourself.
yeah, right, exactly. So it's like I have my table props. Like sometimes I'll forego them, like because they might take too long to set up or something. But occasionally, it's kind of fun, to pull out maybe like the 3D terrain or whatever, and have our inn, like actually have like maybe like a 3D like representation of the inn with the furniture and stuff. Like the players get a kick out of it when it happens. It is sort of like for the interest of keeping it is the sort of like pulling them out for everything is sort of the equivalent of flipping through the pages and rolling dice. Like just it's the terrain equivalent, but
Right. Oh, absolutely.
it
Absolutely.
has its moments.
And in RPGs, I don't think that I'm less a fan of miniatures and terrain in RPGs than I was in the 80s and 90s
Hmm.
because all of my RPG games have moved online, and so I can't even do that at all. And we did try
Mm,
messing around with some video stuff on Roll20, but we just get so bogged down moving things and trying to figure out what's what. And it's like, you know what, guys, we'll just do theater of the mind. And sometimes I cheat and I'll set up a little board on the side over here by my desk. And if there's a
yeah.
big, especially if there's a big battle going on or something like that, and I'll throw down. I've got some little standees that I'll use um,
Hmm.
to represent the party and the enemies and what have you. So that way I can kind of keep an idea in my head as to what's going
Yeah.
on, and I can see it and I can describe it then much more effectively. Um, in fact, I ran a whole chainmail style battle during a session one time, and I had written all the forces out on index cards, and I was moving them around on the table in front of me, following the directions of the players, how they wanted to move their forces, and then I was moving the orcish forces and rolling the dice, and all the action was actually taking place on the desk in front of me, which they couldn't see because I wasn't
Yeah.
videotaping it or anything. Um, but I described it all, and they all rather enjoyed it. And none of them were actually even war gamers. None of them had ever played a war game before. So that was pretty cool. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is that. No, that sounds like that sounds like works. Like we've kind of moved to a little bit like theater of the mind for certain encounters like that just aren't worth taking the time to set up. If I run in like two goblins in the woods or whatever, it's not. Is it really important that I set up like a forest of trees? Like bring out my grass terrain and set that up, and it looks cool. It takes 10 minutes. Maybe that's a bit of exaggeration, but it takes enough where people are starting to like like their attention starts to wander. You kind of got to keep people engaged, and like I get kind of like annoyed. It does kind of grind on my nerves to get it set up just to pull it back apart again.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the cool thing about the standalone war game is that you get to set up the thing, and part of the game is setting up the terrain and getting all that stuff out. Um,
Yeah,
because you're
I didn't
going
even I
to
didn't even think of that as an appeal, but yeah, no, I totally get that. That makes sense.
so but yeah, so okay, cool. So I think we've solved the whole campaign prep problem. It's completely solved now. Fantastic.
We can put it to bed. No, it's just it was a case of I really do think it's a case of like there's a lot of the guys who were probably both parties were probably talking, and there was like certain keywords that were triggering experiences they had with people who they actually should be arguing against. you know
Right, right,
it's like when you're like, oh well, you need to prep something, they're like, in their mind they heard like you need to write a script, and I get why they think that, because most people when they say you need to prep, that's what they mean.
right, right. Whereas in my mind, prep is just a basic dungeon map, a short key, and a random encounter table. So
Yeah,
speaking
and
of
they would
which,
even agree that you need to have a random encounter table. So
right, exactly. And speaking of which, in part one here, you have a
mhm,
section called "The Passage of Time and Exploring the Dungeon."
yes.
And why don't you talk a little bit about that? And what is your philosophy on time and adventures, grand and small, and this living dungeon idea?
Well, so see. So like I took the way I try to set it up is my understanding of the way Gygax lays it out in the in the AD&D first edition Dungeon Master's Guide. Though I do try to maybe like explain it in my own prose, and there's like some debate as to whether Gygax kind of followed his own rules or not, and that's all well and good, but I know I follow my own. I can tell you right now, I follow my own rules. I play it the way I describe it here. Um, and so like and like what I found is technology makes this style of play sort of much easier. Like I imagine it maybe back in the day when you're sending letters back and forth like to people across the country, or you're having to like call somebody on the telephone. Maybe it's a little harder to parse player orders in that way. So yeah, maybe like I can understand like maybe why it was dropped, but when we have a Discord where we can set up threads like sub threads and have downtime threads and rumors and all that stuff, and it's just all in this like compiled place, it really does. It is really sort of trivial to keep track of it, and for the players to kind of stay engaged with it and with each other and with you.
All right. And so, what does that effect have on the dungeon? What's your philosophy of the living dungeon?
So the dungeon as it's typically sort of conceived is this sort of theme park ride where you kind of go in the entrance and your characters go like zip from here to there, and monsters are kind of like sprinkled throughout, kind of where it feels right, which is a problem because sometimes what feels right can really sort of ruin the evening. Um, and then you kind of get done, and then you fight a boss, and then there's a prize at the end. And this is not like there's a reason why people talk about the 5 room dungeon is because that's all they have. Like 5 rooms is all they have the stomach for, and and who could blame them if that's like kind of the setup. So when you kind of attach time to the dungeon, you can attaching time allows you to abstract the things that make the dungeon feel like it's alive. So like most people, you go on Roll20 and people might have like an API script that like moves tokens around the dungeon for you to kind of get that effect. You're not doing that around the table, and you're not doing that if you don't have like the subscription for it on Roll20, and you're not doing it if you don't know how to implement an API script. So what I say is monsters moving around the dungeon need to be abstracted, and the only way you can abstract them is if you have some method of tracking the passage of time to figure out how far they've moved. Like it's like figure out how far the players moved where they might run into one. So there has to be sort of a point where the players basically run out of movement, and the next couple minutes tick by. And then so they can track resource expenditure. Like when buffs start to wear, like their spell buffs start to wear off, or debuffs, or torches start to go out, or supplies start to dwindle. And then after a certain point they might become fatigued, because a lot of these systems have rules for if a certain amount of time in the dungeon you start to get fatigued. So you need to, like, time is so important, and that's what allows you to sort of track at. That's how you get that tension.
Okay. And then in your at your table, do the player characters need to get out of the dungeon at the end of the session, or do you sometimes hit pause in there?
We never pause in the dungeon. So 99.999% of the time they will leave the dungeon. Occasionally, when they're feeling like they're really feeling themselves and they feel like they've kind of conquered this place, they will say like, okay, we're just going to finish out the dungeon in our downtime. And what that usually means is like I do a solo play. So I will take their characters, I have their character sheets, and I kind of just run them through. They understand that whatever happens is on them because they okayed it. you know but there is like a way, you kind of like do that. Or generally, if they can't get out, they have some kind of, they plan for that. Maybe it's like some spell that they can like hide uh for that, like a time. Like I know like there's some spells that like let you have like a extra planar tent where you can kind of sleep there, and it has like all the food and water you need. You can hang out there for a little while. Or there's like teleport or whatever. There's so many ways to be able to get out of the dungeon that like it's very difficult to lock players in the dungeon. It feels like kind of like it'll have to almost be contrived, unless it's really really something that they pushed and you were like, yeah, I don't know, like you might, it might be rough getting out. But otherwise, yeah, it's like it would be a really contrived circumstance. Like it's almost not worth considering.
Okay. Um, Now here I think this is an edge case. And my Thursday group, I run two groups a week, one on Tuesday and one on Thursday. Um, they spent some time traveling and doing some prep and searching for, getting the equipment and stuff that they needed.
Hmm.
Um, and basically, because I also run on a one-to-one downtime basis, and so they spent 6 days preparing for the delve and traveling to the place, and then they went in, um, and we spent a good 3 hours because our sessions tend to run 4 to 4.5 hours, um,
Okay.
and they spent a good long time in the dungeon. And then they're like, okay, it's next week. It's according to the calendar, it's next Thursday, so we're gonna go ahead and just pause here, and then we'll resume. We'll resume next week. I said, you know what, that works. That works. So they
Yeah.
have they
Okay.
have played, played the fade, as it were, and leaned into the timekeeping methodology, so that way they didn't have to spend that game time traveling back again, um,
That's a
which
really
is pretty
clever way
cool.
to do it, I think. Yeah, I would probably rule the same way if my players were to do something like that.
But I'm also lucky enough that at the time, currently on Thursday, I only have 3 players. So
Mm.
up until the holiday season, they were really regular in terms of hitting attending the session. So it wasn't like I had 8 players, but only 6 show up every week, and it's a different 6 every week. Um,
Right.
that something like that, I wouldn't have allowed it, just because I don't want if someone's not there next week, then I don't want to play their character because I've got other things that I have to do. If they want to have someone else play it, they can. Um, we have done that in extreme circumstances, and I have a player who he emailed a he called it as an AI for his character. He's like, just follow this flow chart. Whenever he runs into trouble, just follow this little flow chart, and that'll tell you what to do. Um,
That's
which is
pretty good
which
actually.
is pretty funny. And so that turned into a mini game. And he's like, "All right, let's see what this character's gonna do. Hold on, I'm gonna go through the flow chart."
That's kind of charming in its own way.
Yeah, it actually was fun. It actually was fun. It wasn't as aggravating as you might think it would have been.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well I mean that's kind of the thing with stop time, right? Like you stop time and it's like, well, I hope everybody can make it. Like how many that's the meme is how hard it is to plan a session and get everybody to
Right,
show up.
right, right. I mean, I remember as a kid we played stop time because we didn't know any better.
Right.
We learned how to play D&D from my classmates' older brothers who were going off to college.
Hmm.
They, you know, very graciously donated all of their D&D stuff to us, and over the summer of '82, they sat us down and played 2 or 3 sessions for us, refereed 2 or 3 sessions, so we would know what we were doing.
Hmm.
And then we just went wild with it for ourselves, and we had a blast. But I missed a session one time, and my character died because they sent him off to backstab a hill giant, which didn't work out so good.
Yeah, it happened to a friend of mine too. We were playing in a D20 D20 future back in the day. And he couldn't make a session, and they sent him they put him up front as the point man, and he got a hail of bullets. So he came back, and he was pretty upset, and I could understand why. So
So, what's next on the list? Oh, let's talk about mass combat a little bit. That's kind of
your
my
bread and butter, right?
my bread and butter, my favorite thing. Because I took 20 years off almost from doing role playing games to play miniatures. When I moved to New
Hmm.
Orleans way back in the day, I didn't find a group of people that were role playing at the hobby store, but I did find a bunch of miniatures players. And so I just packed up my RPG stuff and got out the minis, and I literally just played minis, all kinds also, not just Warhammer, but um,
Mm.
a bunch of different genres and rule sets, and uh, and I did that for a long time. And so when I came back to Dungeons and Dragons about
Hmm.
3.5, 4 years ago, and discovered what 5e was like, and then I found the OSR. And I'm like, well, I still have all my old books. Is anybody playing? Does anybody play AD&D? And
Right, right.
and then a lot of people raised their hand and said, yeah, absolutely. Um, and I fell down in the rabbit hole of research that had been done over the past 15 years for mass combat, and where did all this come from, and chainmail, and suddenly all these things that were nowhere to be found in the 80s and 90s. You couldn't get a copy of chainmail where I lived in the 90s.
Hmm.
We would have loved to have had it if someone would have
Right.
shared it with us. And I mentioned this before the show. Um, I lived in Rockford, Illinois, and that's the home of
Mm.
Royal Hobbies, which was owned by Jeff Perrin, who literally wrote chainmail. And I
Huh.
used to go in that store all the time. I was in there once a week, if not more. And so I knew him as the owner of the store. I did not know him as the author of Chainmail. He never brought it up. He saw me, he knew I bought miniatures all the time. Um, he asked what games we were playing, and we would tell him, but he never ever
Oh,
said a word about chainmail. And then
what a
I'm a
shame.
little bit irked by that. Yeah, exactly. I think it's a shame. Because I wish I had known, because we had heard about, the the white box, and we'd heard about original Dungeons and Dragons and chainmail and
Yeah,
things like that. And a
yeah.
friend of mine actually managed to get his hands on Outdoor Survival, and we played that a few times, and that was a lot of fun. But it didn't
Like you,
really
you,
have, well, it had an
you made it.
impact on our D&D, because we were also in scouts, and so we were used to camping and hiking in the woods, and being out in the
Oh yeah,
woods for multiple days.
talk about
So
immersion.
that, yeah, talk about immersion, exactly. So we understood weather, we understood the idea. If you don't have water or food in the woods,
So
you're in a
you're already
lot of
coming at it. You're already
trouble.
coming at it from like this needs to immerse me because I know how this works.
Exactly, exactly. And that used to be our favorite thing, dumping a storm on somebody, or
Yeah.
a freak blizzard would come, and like, how are you going to survive this? Ha ha ha. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, it was a lot of fun. But yeah, so mass combat. I went back and taught myself chainmail, and dug up those old books by Tony Bath and Don Featherstone, and because, and it's been said many times before, chainmail is not a complete game in that booklet. It depends on a decent knowledge of other wargaming fundamentals, um, which
Hmm.
which I believe that all of the original group had, and so that's why so many things just aren't in the rule books, because they were literally common knowledge, and it was assumed that you understood these things.
Yeah. No, that was kind of my understanding of it as well. Because I remember I got chainmail off a drive through RPG, like kind of most people nowadays, and because I was looking basically for mass combat rules because I was tired of hand waving it. It's never fun to hand wave it, you know. Um, and because that's kind of the common, like that's kind of what people say is like they're like, oh yeah, just hand wave it, just do a few rolls and then tell them like how many soldiers die or whatever. Just sort of, just try to keep it, kind of keep it light. You're just trying to convey a feeling, and I find this like this is completely unsatisfying at the end of the day for I think everybody involved.
Well, absolutely, and it was completely dissatisfying for me, because I knew how to play war games, and so,
Right.
and the an ironic thing about it is, back in the mid '90s, I was playing a lot of. We were actually playing a lot of Mordheim, which is sort of a role playing game in and of itself, and
Mm,
so there was a lot of that going on, in that we would combine Mordheim with other. Um, what's the other game? Mighty Empires. And so we moved our armies around on the board, and whenever we'd capture a ruin or a dungeon or something like that, we'd send our Mordheim skirmishers in to get the treasure.
right.
And we ran kind of a campaign that way. Um, I want to say there were 6 or 7 of us. And obviously, not everyone can make it every week, but there was enough there every week to make interesting battles happen. And some weeks you'd fight a full scale battle with your forces, and some weeks you would just do the Mordheim style, or sometimes if you had enough time you could do both. Um,
Yeah.
but so I'm coming at it from that direction, and knowing how it can work relatively easily, when you know what you're talking about and when you know what you're doing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so talk to me a little bit about how you applied that to what you have in here.
Well, um, so I was kind of doing this like I kind of alluded to before, but I was trying to find a mass combat system to basically kind of like Frankenstein plug into. At the time, we were playing Pathfinder First Edition, and I was trying to find something that would plug into that because that game has like a kind of a mass combat subsystem that is even less satisfying than hand waving. Um, so we I was trying to like I was kind of just kind of desperate. I was getting like different war games rules, trying to look through those and try to find something that like was able to kind of accommodate like that particular rule set, whereas like it wouldn't seem like completely out of place. Um, and, and I, at the end of the day, it kind of turned into a fool's errand. Well, anyway, I ended up there's a few things that kind of happened. Um, so I in my search of like kind of trying to figure out how to play chainmail, I came across John Mollison's channel, Joy of Wargaming, and he described kind of the expectation of scaling up in AD&D, and he kind of described how to do it. He showed like he kind of like walked it through the process on the table about how it works, at least like the way he interpreted it. And I remember being really inspired by that. And he did recommend some war games reading, which would be Tony Bath and Donald Featherstone. And I ended up picking up Tony Bath's Ancient Wargaming immediately after that, and to read for myself. Because, I mean, I could look at these things in action, but if you don't understand the fundamentals, like it does, you can't apply it to anything. So my instinct was like my interest was piqued when I was like when I understood kind of what was trying to be communicated to me, but I couldn't understand it until I kind of sat down and went through Tony Bath, and that's kind of when I figured out kind of how I wanted to attach a mass combat system to the game, the particular game I was playing at the time.
Awesome, awesome. Now, have you played any war games with Tony Bass rules?
I have not. I have not. I do like that is definitely something that I would like to try to do in 2024 at some point because I do have a buddy who does have a war games background, and I actually bought Tony Bass Ancient Wargaming twice, so I actually gave him my first copy because he was in love with it too, and I was originally going to let him borrow it. And he got through it, and I said, "Dude, just keep it." Like he was kind of singing his praise. I said, "Just keep it. I'll buy another one." So that was kind of my gift to him. So he got my first copy. But so we might sit down and actually me and him might are gonna probably try to play a little Tony Bath war game.
Awesome. Um, I've done a couple videos that show some of the old school combat games. So if you want to check those out, I'll put the links down in the description below, but I'll share them with you here as well.
Oh, I'd
Um,
be very interested. Yeah.
and in fact, I also have Don Featherstone's Naval Wargaming book, and he's got some
Oh, cool.
really basic naval war rules for ancients, triremes and that sort of thing. And I've made a quick reference sheet on that, and that's on my itch.io page, which
I'll
is
have
right
to
here.
subscribe to that.
And I think I can show that to everybody. Okay. Oh, so here's also a basic mass combat system. This kind of walks people through how to how to scale and how to play that way. Um, what else here? Where's my page? But if you go to Ancient Naval Battles, you can download my own uh, interpretation. Um, there's an article about the rules on my Substack, and it's a free download. Featherstone Bath Ancients, ship to ship combat. I made some little character sheets for your boats that you can play. It's super easy, and I actually had a patron in the game that I run. I sent him these rules because he was the pirate king, and he actually used these battle rules a couple times. He played some games with his nephew for the campaign, which was really cool.
Oh, that is cool.
So, and he had never played a war game before either. So that was pretty exciting. That um, they're literally not that complicated. They will not bog you down, and they're fairly abstract. You move around, you shoot. Everybody's got a catapult and archers and what have you, and it's a lot of fun. Um, and you can just use cardboard counters if you want. I made boats um, with foam core, and if you download this, there's actually some pictures. I drew some Viking longboats um, and like made painted tokens that you can download and glue those down on foam core and cut them out and use those for the battles. So you might want to give that a
Cool.
try.
That sounds fun.
That awesome. So yeah, so I just want to say this is a great resource. I read about three-fourths of it. I really dove into the chapter headings that really caught my eye. But this is a fantastic resource. I highly recommend it to everybody.
Well, thank
Um,
you.
you're welcome. Um, is there anything else you want to say about this, or about inspiration, or anything like that, or about campaign prep?
Um, no, I think I kind of yeah, I kind of got to my inspirations as far as what how I sort of tried to construct my chapters on mass combat. So I do have like philosophies as to like why I chose the way I did or why I worded it the way I did. But otherwise, yeah, no, that's as far as what inspired it. Yeah, pretty well and truly covered it. And prep, yeah, I feel like I've said what I need to say on prep.
Well, we saw prep. Prep's all set.
Yeah,
So
prep
that's
solved. Like, what's else is there to say?
cool. Let's see here. Well, you know what? That's pretty much everything I've got on my list. Is there anything you want to talk about? Anything you
Um,
questions, comments, jokes?
let's see. Um, no, I think I'm good. Let's see, mass combat. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess far as like what kind of like got me, what I was trying to do with mass combat was basically, I try to pass off a lot of the rules onto the whatever system that you've selected as like your mechanical foundation. Is what I call it. And then I try to like get like the kind of the best practices, and I just kind of lay those out, and so that they can that they sort of these best practices sort of build on the core rule set, so that your players are playing the same game just bigger. Like, and that's kind of how I was thinking about mass combat. So they don't have to learn a new game in order to have an army, which that's kind of that's the barrier to entry, I think, for mass combat.
Well, yes, that is that, and thinking that you need to have miniatures
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think it's necessary at all.
because you don't need miniatures. You can just use pieces of paper. Mr. Wargaming has got a couple videos where he just uses index cards and literally notebook paper scraps torn from a page. Um, but they're effective, and you can get the job done. And
Mhm.
especially if you're playing theater of the mind, you don't, if you're playing online, no one else can appreciate your cool miniatures,
Right. Right. And but playing online. I do it because it's what I have to do for some of my people. But yeah, I prefer to be around the table
I would
with
love to be around
tactile
the
tools.
table, um, but we have moved so many times that it's just hard to keep a group together. The
Yeah,
best
yeah,
thing, I'll say this right now, the best thing about my Thursday night group, we've been playing for just over 3 years now. Um, but I've literally moved 3 times in lived in 3 different states during
oh
that
wow.
during that period. So, but we've been able to keep the campaign going. So we didn't have to, well, see you later, guys. I'm sorry. Um,
Hmm. Yeah,
those 2 campaigns I was running in 1994. I literally just handed all my notes off to one of the other players because he was going to take over as the DM. Um, which kills me now, 30 years later.
yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had those notes.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. Imagine what you do with 30 years worth of downtime.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I took 20 years off the game, but I would love to just have that stuff, the things that I
Yeah.
had created, the world. I mean, because I had made a really in-depth uh, campaign setting based on Albion, England for
Hmm.
the Dangerous Journey system in the time of the Romans, and it was a lot of fun. It was really cool. Um,
Yeah, that's
I
a
would,
untapped. I think like I don't. I think people kind of get stuck in like the sword and sorcery, like medieval England, like in a fantasy. But there's something to be said for the RPG set at the in the Roman Empire or
yeah.
Roman inspired.
Well, and that so I'll ask this question then. What is the setting for your home game?
It is Albion, and so it's kind of well, it's a mixture. It's like I got the Albion kingdom. I got like kind of the Germany, kind of Dark Age Germany, or rather steampunk Germany. And then I got kind of like high middle age France. And I'm pretty shameless and just ripping off kind of real world European cultures. Because I mean, it's familiar. People get it. They're pretty easily able to get involved. They understand the forms sort of instinctively. Um, and I do think it maybe be like I think being derivative is somewhat overstated as a problem. Um, because like I think people are pretty happy to get immersed in a thing as long as it sort of takes itself seriously.
All right. So for the current campaign that I'm running, I'm actually using the outdoor survival map.
Okay.
And what I did is I flipped it over. I rotated it 180 degrees. So what is the north here is actually the southern shore of the continent. Um, and then I replaced this little foresty area here with a long serpentine butte sort of
Oh, okay.
geological feature. But it's set to be more like uh, closer to the ancient period than it is
Okay.
to the Middle Ages, just to give it more of a sword and sandal feel.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool.
And that way we can try to avoid some of those, standard tropes and memes and try to get a little more creative with the setting.
Yeah, no, more power to you.
Like the
Um,
it's a temperate area. So right now, and because it's January in the world, but it's warm there, so it only gets into the 50s and 60s. So people are still in their
mm,
togas and tunics and what have you. So it's cool. It's a lot of fun.
yeah, that sounds neat. Um, yeah. And I guess maybe the other thing I would want to emphasize is I think more people need to read Tony Bath. Um, because you'd be surprised if you come from like a D&D background going to Tony Bath and you find what is basically sort of like when he describes his Hyborian campaign, it's basically kind of a proto D&D campaign. Like there are patrons, like the people are like the players are kind of like talking to each other in character, or at least they think of themselves as being in a character. Um, yeah, they kind of run their nations and stuff. I believe this was Tony Beth when he's talking about one of his players like actually had kind of like the finances of the kingdom kind of charted out in a spreadsheet somewhere, which was which was pretty funny. I might be getting that confused with something, but yeah, I it's like so it's helpful to kind of know to kind of see the kind of uh that underlying framework, and then you can there's like you learn that etiquette and you learn kind of like what how they were sort of running their games, and it suddenly all kind of makes sense of how to like kind of really maximize your D&D game.
Yeah,
I
yeah. The
would say.
first time, the first time I read Ancient Wargaming and how to set up a wargame campaign, I just kept smacking my forehead with my palm because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
every few pages you run into something, you're like, oh, look, that's this is where that came from in D&D. This is where that came from, and
Yeah.
it really does help the understanding of why some of these things that seem kind of strange, where they came from. So
Yeah. Well, and Tony Bath was so influential on me that like the book really is sort of like I tried to do kind of what he did for war games, like I tried to do for D&D. Like I just tried to do like what like kind of what he would have done. if it was a different subject, I guess. Like it's definitely spiritual. Like it tries to be spiritually kind of tap into that a little bit. Is what I was attempting at least.
Awesome. Awesome.
I would say it's closer. Like Tony Bathos will probably might be a bigger influence on me than the DMG was. The DMG helped me get like a lot of stuff done, but like a lot of that went through the lens of ancient war games.
Awesome. Well, there you go. Fantastic. Where are we at here? We are at, wow, 55 minutes.
Mhm.
Cool. Thank you for your time. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I didn't realize, see, I got immersed. I didn't,
Good, good, good.
I didn't realize how long this went. And this is going to be on the uh, World of Worth Fantasy Roleplay channel. And I'm not into doing a lot of production stuff on there. So this will go up pretty much raw,
Sweet.
the way it is now. Was there anything in here you wanted me to cut out?
Nope. I stand by everything I said.
I'm giving you one last chance.
Yep.
All
No,
right,
I'm pretty happy with
awesome,
what I said.
awesome. Well, thanks, John. And you know what? I just want to end this with an invitation. If you ever want to jump in, we have an active campaign going on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you definitely have an invitation to join us if you wish.
I
Um,
appreciate that. I
because you know
like.
what, you can start a character and join the party wherever they are because we don't do stop time. So be sure and
Fair enough.
check it out. If you want
Easy
more
peasy.
information about it, it is at shadowoversojenka.blogspot.com. Basically, the whole campaign is there, plus the first, I want to say, 27 session reports. Um, Doing 2 sessions a week makes it really hard to do session
Yeah.
reports. And
Yeah.
I also have a miniature gaming channel that I'm trying to get going and turn into something as well. So
Okay.
I'm not doing the session reports as often anymore. There
We
are
do
a
what we
couple that I
can.
really want to get to because I think they're important in terms of how to referee this or how to referee that. And so I'm
Hmm.
still working on those. But I also have on here some character class information, how to make a character, and work in progress special classes. So if you want to check those out, I welcome any feedback as well.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. And I guess I'll plug my stuff. If that's all
Do
right
it.
with
Yeah,
you.
plug, plug, plug.
I am on X.com, formerly known as Twitter, at McGowan John N. And I'm also on Substack at johnnmcgowan.substack.com. It is the Crown's Corner, and is sort of a place where I will post my longer form D&D takes or tabletop gaming in general takes, and it's kind of a place where I will be kind of serializing an adventure story. So it's going to be a repository for my fiction. I got the first 5 chapters up. Those are free. Everything after chapter 5 will probably be behind a paywall. But yeah, so that's the Crown's Corner.
Is it crownscorner.substack.com?
It is johnnmcgowan.substack.com.
Oh, okay, so you have two. Okay, so I have this. I just
Yeah.
have
So
John.
yeah, when you go in that Substack, you'll see the Crown's Corner like in the banner.
There we go. All right, it is on the screen. Awesome.
Perfect.
Well, there you go, folks. Go subscribe to that Substack. There's great stuff on there. And I want to thank everyone for watching. For those of you who are still with us, and please hit like and subscribe. Share this with your friends. And as always, I appreciate constructive commentary and criticism down in the area below. Thanks, and have a happy 2024.
Bye bye.